Hello everyone, welcome to this chapter of System Development Lifecycle and HRIS Needs Analysis. Basically, the system development lifecycle is the evaluation of needs of one's firms, and once the firm has decided to go for the for the evaluation or for the adoption of new system, they might have defined their way of implementing. They might have already planned, and they already might have analyzed and analyzed the needs and the current and future situation or the position that the organization might be. So therefore, they develop a system and adopt it. But we would be discussing each step for this system development lifecycle one by one. Now here we can see these are the stages: planning, analyzing, designing, implementing, and then maintaining the whole process. In planning, it might involve the short-term planning or long-term product planning that the system is supposed to serve the purpose of the organization. In analysis, we analyze or the organization analyze the needs, current situations, the advantages and the feasibility of the whole project, and ultimately designs basically involves the implementation. So we would be looking at it step by step. First one is the planning. In planning, organizations define their long-term or short-term plan. If this, whether they need a system that serves them for the shorter period of time or the longer period of time. Analysis. Analysis is much complicated, complex, or more detailed version. Basically, in this step, every organization decides whether they want the system and how the system is going to serve them, and they also analyze the current situation, and they develop the management in a way that the system is being documented, and ultimately the purpose is defined clearly in black and white. And design is basically the blueprint, the ultimate final, the document of the system, and then the way it would be implemented or executed. The implementation process is simply the process to go for the system. It could also involve implementing the system in steps, or it might or it in a one go. The final stage is the maintenance. Ultimately, of course, once the software is being implemented, then it must be evaluated and maintained with the time, because every system might be having few bugs that were not tested early, or as we use the system, we might realize the deficiencies or the points that might be added, or some few modules might be added in the maintenance stage. So it is basically a continuous process, and it is not a one-way direction. So it keeps on changing, and with the time, the organization or the design or structure of the organization might change. So therefore, similarly, the planning short term, that might be involved in the short term planning, but again, the process would be followed continuously. So here is the overview. This is the planning stage, long-term, short-term range need is analyzed, and the analysis, the needs analysis and gap analysis, where we stand, where we want to go, and what the current software, if the organization has it, what is it is serving, and what is the next is supposed to do. And the overview also includes the design, which is the blueprint for the system or the vendor selection. Of course, we need some sort of a vendor that will be providing the software, because the organization itself will not be producing its own software. And then implementing, build, test, and ready right to go live. It is ready, basically being made ultimately to just go for it. And then of course, maintenance involves some characteristic that would be corrective, if there are bugs; adaptive if you want to change something; perfective to make it improved; and preventive to make sure that the security threats or the false errors that have occurred, they do not occur permanently, or the hardware or software does not collapse. So these are the basically overview of SDLC. Now we would be discussing them in detail. As we discussed, planning simply is the long-term range planning. It might be because of the strategy or the big picture of the organization where it wants to go, and the phase containment, or the, we can say, the different stages that organization wants to accomplish with a period of time. Whereas a needs short range analysis might involve planning in terms of operational perspective. They might require the software or the development of the software for operational purpose or routine basis. For example, if an employee or the organization facing they are advertising some job or vacancies, they might be having difficulty due to the large number of CVs, resumes there are dropped in that organization. Sorting them out is a very difficult task. So this organization might be working as a candidate provider for the other organization. So therefore, they need to have a good efficient software. So these could be the operational, basically, needs of the organization. There can also be the a specific project, temporary, time being, or the programs that needs to be managed for the organization. So these are all included in the planning. These are the big three questions that are very basic to be asked. Where are we going now, or where are we going, where we were previously, and how are we going to get there in future. Vale? Po? Vale? टिक्की क्या घुराया ना? टिक्की घुरा जाओ. हाँ. So these are the big three questions that any organization might consider first before going any further developing any needs analysis or going in for further process. Where they are now and where they are, what are they doing or where are they going now, and the, of course, how are they going to get there, of course. So these are the three big questions for particular organization. They are the basic ones in which the organization asks itself, where are we now, the present or the current situation, or where are we going, or the future situation, and the process or the how the organization. So these are the basic three questions. These are now known as the big three. Where are we going, where are we now, and where we are going, and how the process of going to get there is going to be achieved. And these questions need to be revisited and revised so that the implementation of the software development gets a better position. And the big three needs, a triangle is here represented in a presentation way. So analysis is our detailed version of after planning. That is analyzing the needs, dissect and document current capabilities of the organization, and identifies and prioritizes needs, what they want ultimately in the organization, and conduct a gap analysis in which the difference between what we have and what we don't have is being generated. And if we were to go for the future organization projects or the goals, and so what we need to have, which was not achieved till now at the present current position. So this is the gap analysis that must be conducted, and review the feasibility analysis, of course. If it is the project or the development of the software is feasible enough, or is the organization ready to go for it, can the organization bear the cost of the project, or is it practically important to go for the organization, or do we have the trained employees for in that perspective? So determine usefulness of gap analysis in developing RFP for vendors. Basically, these are the basic elements that will help us to determine which vendor should we contact first. The current analysis regarding where are we now is the current situation, is current analysis uses a combination of methods People might be interviewed or in the organization, or the people who are working in the organization might be interviewed. Focus group might be interacting with people or the employees within the organization, and those employees might give them very you know very basic insight or the face-to-face information. Or surveys and online tools, survey tools are also very useful by in terms of emailing the employees or the customers, depending on the type of organization. So we can ask these employees or the organization what they want in future, or what are the difficulties that they are facing right now. And the organizational archives, where we have our old record, which shows the that organization has achieved some certain points, but it might also need to go for certain changes in the future. So these can be can also be utilized. So who would be the people to whom we are going to ask these questions? These are the HR functional experts, which are basically specialized in the HR functions, and they would tell us what we need in HR. Job experts, they might give us insight regarding job designs that are needed. So therefore, we need an HRIS system or the upcoming. So there are the job experts as well, technical experts that might be uh, helping us to design the job, or maybe we need a technical expert to design this system ultimately, and in the end users, so the users of that particular software, they might need training, because with the current situation, are the users that would ultimately be also telling us about the using of the software, the current software if they are using, or the current situation or the difficulties they are facing. So these could be the potential population, or the potential sample, or the potential people that might give us the good idea, or the top management that might be already be facing those complaints or difficulties, and consultants and other business partners that are integrated with us. They might also be having a good idea of what the current position of our organization is. Then the future, the basic question comes here, which arrives at the heart of need analysis and business requirements definition. It is a point at which organizations determine and documents its current and future needs, because this is a black and white situation in which the organization charts down what is needed and what we are going to do for it, and often uses interchangeably with needs analysis. Sometimes it also is interchanged with the needs analysis, in which the whole documentation process is done regarding our current and future position, prioritize business and system needs. Where do we need to go for the system analysis, or we want to go for the adopting a new system directly, or is it our priority to check it first, make test, and then ultimately decide whether the system needs to be have need to be some sort of amendments are needed in the system that might help us to reach the future, or in the future what are the our what would be the priorities that we want to achieve first from the software. So these are the basic analysis questions. And then the gap analysis. Ultimately, at the end of the analysis, we compare the current state of HRIS with the desired state of HRIS, or where we want to go for that, or the goals or the prospects conditions where we want to achieve, we want to be in future. What is important, and what important needs are not being met yet, which is that is the organization might be having an HRIS software already, but that software might not be serving very well. So what are not being served by that software, it is here being identified. What important needs are being met, and what is being served by the software. Definitely important decision making tools for HR project leaders are to be identified ultimately in the gap analysis. This is basically hypothetical gap analysis report, in which each function is identified here, and then the current situation that we have and what we want to go for, and then we prioritize our each function, and it will tell us the the priority will tell us which function is more important, and which function it needs to be served first. So this brings us to the conclusive, uh, analysis or So this brings us to the critical questions regarding the SDLC. Who should determine what our needs are going forward, and how can we ensure that all of our needs are identified or documented very well? How do we limit the scope to the things we truly need? That is, how should we get prioritize our needs, because organization might need all of the aspects that a software might serve, but we have to be limited to our the basic priorities that are needed, because as we know that developing a software or getting a software developed for the custom made organization is not that much uh, cheap. So it might need a lot of expense, and it could be a costly decision. So therefore we need to have limited indications. So therefore, that is why we need a deeper analysis to evaluate what actually we need, rather than just adopting a huge whole HRS software. It is feasible at this point to implement system that can meet our critical needs. Is it necessary to implement right now, or is it necessary to implement later on, or is it required to be implemented in parts? So these are the basic questions that are that needs to be uh, you know asked for before going through this huge decision for an organization. So now we would be concluding what we have gone through in this chapter in terms of organization, planning and everything. So in these steps, planning that we have discussed could be short and long term. It also depends on the strategy that we want to achieve. Second is the analysis, where the scope, resources, budget, timeline, and everything is decided and analyzed basically, and what needs are to be prioritized, and those needs are to be fulfilled first in the from the software. And the needs analysis are further divided into the current system performance, new system requirements that might be needed, and other expected opportunities from the system. If we adopt, what are those opportunities that we can get from the system? So it is further detailed in three or four sections. There is a need analysis, planning, prepare need analysis, team, give roles to each member of the team, define goals of those teams, determine tools and techniques to be used to analyze, and then the observations. Analyze current situation of the organization, define new system needs to be filled by the system, identify performance gaps that the system might be offering earlier, but the system might not be necessarily performing or fulfilling the requirements for the future that we are going to plan, and classify the data which was observed, and ultimately define the priorities in that step, and review with management that these priorities should be given the importance that we have observed. And then the exploration comes in, where we take interviews from the employees, users that we have discussed detail, and the HR managers, and the exploration goes on. And then the other technique might be observation. Observers observe the usage of users and the difficulties that an organization might be facing, and then the questionnaire might be fulfilled by the employees, organization, or the managers, and the focus group might be created, in which we have discussed that the groups might get a good interview from the each of the member that is working in the organization. Fourth is evaluation. Prioritize and check sheets are made here, and which we have seen in terms of function and the priorities, and giving the weightage according to them, and then we decide which typical task or function is necessary to be performed first, and then the others. So important details are visualized here, and presented in a accessible format. And then the third is the design. It is basically the blueprint or the detailed document of the requirements and the priorities and everything that is needs to be implemented, and then needs to be find out in the system software or the requirements that we want to have in the software. Fourth is implementation. That it might we have discussed in the previous chapter. The 14 steps might be used in implementation. That is, we can go live directly, or we can use a pilot study method, or we can use the parallel method, or we can use segment by segment implementation of the software. And then ultimately, we once we have implemented, we are the users are using it, and the decision makers are making a few decisions on that basis. So there needs to be corrective measures might be taking. There might be some few bugs that need to be that are needed to be fixed, and they could maintenance involves adaptive maintenance as well, as per new needs of HR might arise with the time, or the new you know uh, requirements might be fulfilled and or to be adopted in the system. And then the perfective maintenance involves the tweak or improve the existing software that we have in our organization implemented already. So we might be working to maintain in terms of taking perfective measures to improve the performance of the software ultimately. And then there is a preventive measure which we have discussed, and the software might we should have to be very careful. The software or the hardware is do not collapse when the whole organization is taking the full advantage of the software. So we have to be careful in that purpose as well. So which this is also involved in the maintenance. So maintenance involves basically corrective, adaptive, perfective, and the preventive measures. So this basically brings us to the end of this chapter, and thank you so much.